In today's video, we're going to be talking about why your lower back or sciatica will be aggravated when you are sitting down, especially when you're in chairs where your knees are higher than your hips. There's a clear reason for this, and hopefully in this video, you're going to really understand why that is. And please, if you are struggling with this, you will then stop sitting in those chairs because it'll help you understand your back pain and what you need to do by understanding what not to do to really help enhance that recovery process. Sitting down, whether or not it's painful, is not a helpful process when it comes to lower back pain. Excessive sitting puts pressure on those discs, it puts pressure on that lumbar spine in ways that is not helpful. But at least if we understand how we can sit better, we can make this activity, which is often a necessary part of life, a little bit less detrimental to your recovery process. Now, before we get into the anatomy here, there are two specific examples that we can think about that might put us in this position. Number one is you're nice and cozy, you're on the chair and you've got your knees propped up, hugged up. Maybe you're watching a film, maybe it's winter time, you're wrapped up nice and warm, maybe you've got some hot chocolate or something like that, enjoying your evening. Number two is, again, you might be sat down in a chair and you've got your feet reclined. And as you'll see in today's video, that's going to have an impact on specifically the hamstrings, and that knock-on effect we'll talk about on the board in a moment is going to span into your lower lumbar spine, putting more pressure on those discs. So let's first and foremost start off with what's actually happening in the spine. Your lower back is designed to have a smooth circular curve going through it. Well, it's not typically circular, it's more of an ellipse, meaning that it's got more curve down in the bottom part of the lumbar spine and less at the top. It starts to flatten out as it goes into the thoracic spine, and where the thoracic spine has its kyphosis or forward bend, there's that nice little transition point here. Most of us, when we have lower back pain or sciatica, that's symptoms going down the leg, will have some sort of injury in this lower section of the lumbar spine. That's going to be the L4-5 disc region or joint, and then the L5-S1 joint. L5 meaning the fifth lumbar vertebra, S1 meaning the first of the sacral vertebra, which are basically fused together down here, make up the orange part of this spine. But when we are sitting compared to standing, even if we're sitting perfectly, there's always that little bit of change in the anatomy in terms of the orientation of this lumbar spine, and that has the effect of loading a little bit more onto these lumbar discs. Another example of an activity that loads our lumbar disc is going to be forward bending. Again, even if we bend forwards with textbook perfect form, because of the way in which these levers change, it is going to exert more pressure through the discs, let alone if we bend forward with a rounded back. So how does this all relate to sitting and getting that aggravation in pain? Well, when we're sitting for long periods of time, this effect of rounding the lumbar spine starts to load more onto these discs, creating irritation. If we think we have a sore on the surface of our skin, if we press those tissues, it can become painful. If we stress those tissues, and perhaps a better example would be if we have a literal cut or a paper cut and we pull the sides of the cut apart, that is what we're doing. We're delivering more compression to these discs, which when they become injured have failed under the very load of compression. So anything that is going to increase this load, increase this force on the disc, is going to be problematic. And when we sit down, even in a normal position, we will be rounding the lower back and putting more pressure through these discs. This can sometimes be okay because as we round our lower back, the little holes where these nerves come out of get a little bit larger and therefore create more space or decompress that area, which is not something that's helpful, but it lulls us into a false sense of security. And then it is only when we actually stand back up again that all of a sudden the pain sets in. And if you want to understand more about why standing up after sitting is so very painful and sometimes can really take your breath away with that sharp pain, then there'll be a link above my head to learn more on that, about that particular video that goes into detail on that phenomenon. So one of the things that has an influence over the curvature in our lumbar spine, the rate of bend that we discussed earlier, is going to be the muscles. And I've drawn them very, very simply here. If we imagine our pelvis, we've got the sacrum in here and the hip sockets. Just looking at the spine here, we can see the hip sockets are here and the sacrum is obviously set within the pelvis. They're not quite opposite one another. There's going to be a little bit of discrepancy there, but the center of rotation or the axis of rotation is slightly off here. So as we rotate some of these things, as we rotate our pelvis forwards or backwards, that has an impact on the curvature of our lumbar spine by definition because it is connected. Now we've got the hip flexors on the front, which are responsible for turning this wheel forwards. That would be anterior pelvic tilt. And those might be muscles like the rectus femoris, like the psoas muscle, which runs on the front of the spine and pulls round. And then we've got those muscles on the back. The primary ones we're thinking of here are going to be our hamstrings, which attach in at the ischial tuberosity, those bony bits that you sit on your bum. Quite often when you're slumping, you're actually not sitting on those bony bits. Like I discussed earlier with the spine, you're not sitting on these here. You're slumped so far back, you're actually sitting on your tailbone or your sacrum. That's something very, very common. People say, oh, it really hurts when I sit on my tailbone. It's like, yeah, you shouldn't be sitting on that. It's not designed to be sat on. You should be sitting on this ischial tuberosity. And as we see in this image here, when you are sitting on this tailbone, when we're sat in that slumped back position, we are cranking our lumbar spine and compressing those discs. It's difficult for me to do to this model to pull it all the way around. I don't want to break another spine. But as we pull around, it drives pressure through these discs and really exacerbates the problem. But why is it happening like that? Because it doesn't need to. Now, quite often, injuries in the lower part of our lumbar spine are going to send referral out to the hamstrings, the glutes, and other muscles, but they cause these to tighten up. So if you're there sat with your knees up around your chest, those hamstrings are going to pull around here and pull that pelvis into that posterior rotation, therefore compressing the discs and stretching all of these structures through here, which is not something we want when we have lower back pain. The same sort of thing occurs when our hip moves above our sacrum and our knees off up here somewhere, when we think about sitting in that position we discussed earlier with the feet elevated. As our legs are straight out, that pulls our hamstrings even more, and it takes our hip flexors off tension. Those hip flexors, because the hip has moved from flat up to 90 degrees now, the hip flexors have relaxed completely, and it's those hamstrings that are yanking that back round. So if you don't have enough flexibility in your hamstrings, you're going to find you're regularly sat in this position. Now you might be thinking, hey, okay, great, I'm going to do stretching my hamstrings. Well, that is going to be a very, very temporary solution. Why is that? Because if we have any sort of injuries to our lower lumbar spine down here, we've injured these segments. Every time we aggravate or move around, especially in the early days, you might move a little bit funny, you go and pick something up. We aggravate the tissues around here, we're going to get a reflexive spasm in those muscles. So you think you've just done your great bit of stretching. Now your hamstrings are nice and mobile. Maybe you did a PNF, maybe you just did some simple 30-second effective stretching to release off your hamstrings, and they're feeling fantastic. You then walk out the front door, bend down to pick something or move funny. All of a sudden you aggravate that lower back again, and now your hamstrings are tight again. So hamstring tightness is something that you work on as part of your rehabilitation program. And those of you that are in the Back in Shape program will know this anyway. But the really important part that you must be working, if you're someone that is struggling with back pain, when your feet are elevated in that position, when your knees are above your hips, then you really want to be working on the appropriate strengthening based program. Work that is going to protect these tissues down here, build your core stability, start teaching you to move properly again, and then build your strengthening as well. And if you want more information on that, click the link above my head to learn a little bit more about the premium program and how it can help you fix your back pain effectively. So we've discussed in this video what you shouldn't be doing and why that having those hips in that position relative to the knees is going to be disadvantageous. Well, what can we do to make this easier? You've got things like kneeling chairs, chairs where your thighs are not pulled up as high, where your knee is very much lower than your hip, and those can be a really helpful solution for the short term. We've also got strategies like putting a little rolled up towel in the lower back here to block it as it tries to flatten out when you're sat in certain positions. But the biggest thing you can do for the short term if you're struggling with lower back pain is going to be limit your sitting. Sitting is something that directly puts more stress and strain through the tissues that you've injured. It's no good saying I want to be able to sit for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours at a time while you're trying to recover. You want to limit that. It's just not helpful. It's like saying I'm trying to lose weight but I want to have 2 cakes 3 times a day. It's just not going to happen even if you're doing all of the other right stuff. Sitting is something that directly puts more stress than usual through your lower lumbar discs, and if they're injured in you or that segment of your lower back is injured and where the source of your symptoms are coming from, then sitting for extended periods is going to be bad. To combat this, the best thing you can do is be fidgety and get up regularly. Change your position. Use things like sitting standing desks. Take phone calls standing, walk around the office. Have a bottle of water on your desk that you can fill up and that you can drink. That's going to have numerous benefits aside from the fact that it'll get you up visiting the bathroom more frequently. All these little strategies, whilst you're doing the right rehab to fix your back pain properly, are really going to help you make sitting a lot more manageable and a lot less aggravating for the underlying lower back injury. Hopefully you found this video particularly helpful and you better understand the anatomy as to why these things are problematic, and with those last few little tips you've got a better understanding of what you need to do right now, at least while you're working diligently on your rehab. If you did find this video helpful, give us a thumbs up. If there's anything that wasn't clear, post it in the comments below, because we do read every single one of your comments and comment back as best as we can in all the circumstances. And remember, if you do want to stay up to date with our latest videos, click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on another video just like this. Oh, and before you go, if you haven't heard, we've got our brand new Back in Shape podcast, as well as our Sunday email newsletter, which is a great source of information, just like this video you've just watched, as well as the specific podcast every week where we go through detailed topics to really help you on everything back pain related, but also your health and well-being as well. You can click the link above here or in the description to learn a little bit more about that and sign up to the newsletter. It is free and it is a great source, and we love to help you guys with that and appreciate any feedback you've got once you've come on board. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.